This episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com. Be sure and check them out and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hello, folks. Welcome to the podcast. This is episode number 268 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. I'm Gordon Brewer, and so glad you've joined me. Glad you're with me on this journey. And if you haven't done so already, be sure and take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. So in this episode, I'm really looking forward to you hearing again from my good friend Julie Harris from GreenOak Accounting. Julie and I have been friends for quite a while now. We were just as we were kind of reminiscing before we started recording this episode. Julie and I met probably back in around 2018, 2019. And Julie has been such a big support to me and the work that she does at GreenOak Accounting. In particular, just teaching therapists about the financial side of private practice. We have a course that we did together called Money Matters in Private Practice, which is still available, and it's due for an update. So we've been talking about that. But the big exciting thing for Julie is Julie's got a book that is coming out in May called Profit First for Therapists, and if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you've probably heard me talk about profit first. Profit first is a term that was really kind of developed by Mike Michalowicz, who, if you go way back in some of these episodes, I got to interview Mike Michalowicz, but Mike came up with the term and the concept of profit first, and he wrote a book on that. And it's one of the leading books for small businesses and large businesses, just on thinking about the financial side of running a business in a much different way. And Julie's going to explain that in this particular episode. But the thing about it is that, as many of you know, the way that we do business for therapy practices is a little different than a lot of other small businesses, in that we're providing a service, and really our product is our knowledge and time that we provide to people. So anyway, we'll get into my conversation with Julie. One of the things I wanted to let you know about is that obviously you're listening to a podcast here. And one of the things, needless to say, that I'm passionate about is podcasting. And I really love this media. And, I get to talk to great people like Julie and just other therapists and counselors across the nation and across the world, just leaders and people that are doing innovative things and really providing different kinds of resources and ideas. But I love this medium. And one of the things, because I love this medium so much, I started a network this past year. You've heard me mention it here on the podcast, the Psychcraft network. So I would commend that to you. Go check it out, psychcraftnetwork.com, and you can see all the other great podcasts that are a part of this network. But one of the things that has come with that is I've gotten a lot of encouragement from people to start a podcasting course or do a podcasting course for other counselors, therapists, or people in the service providing genres, or maybe another way to put it is just allied health genres, is to put a course together on podcasting. And so I've partnered with my friend James Marland, who was in last week's episode. And you heard, if you haven't heard that episode, I invite you to go back and listen to it, where we talk about this course that's coming up. But anyway, you can check it out by going to practiceoftherapy.com/podcasting course and learn more about that upcoming live course that's going to be offered on March 31st. And so the last day of March. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that. And also got some free webinars and things that will be available to folks. You can just find out about those by going to practiceoftherapy.com/webinars. And if you're on my email list, you will have gotten links to enroll in those free webinars or learning events, as I like to call them. I'm really, not to get too far off on a tangent, but one of the things that I'm learning is that so many of us are so Zoom wary. Sitting through a video webinar is not as fun as it used to be. So we've really kind of changed things up with some of our webinars to make it more fun and enjoyable for people, in maybe a little bit entertaining. So anyway, you can check out that webinar and any of the others that I have available at practiceoftherapy.com/webinars. So here, real quickly, before we get to my conversation with Julie Harris, here's a little bit more from our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes, and also one of our colleagues at the Psychcraft Network.
Hi, I'm Whitney Owens. If you don't know me, I am the person behind the Wise Practice podcast, which is part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. I am so proud to be a part of this network, along with my good friend Gordon Brewer, who's doing such amazing work on helping people on their practice journey. If you haven't discovered the Wise Practice podcast yet, you can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'd love for you to join us as we explore how to grow a faith-based practice that brings you the income you need and the lifestyle you want. Be sure to check out the podcast and other helpful information at whitneyowens.com. There you will learn more about the Wise Practice community, how to become a member, as well as information on the 2023 Wise Practice Summit. And hey, Psychcraft Network is a sponsor, so hope you can make it.
One of the keys to a successful private practice is having the right systems and processes in place to make things run as smoothly as possible. With a system like TherapyNotes, you'll have more time to spend with what matters most, your clients. TherapyNotes is a complete practice management system with everything you need to manage patient records, schedule appointments, meet with patients remotely, create rich documentation, and bill insurance right at your fingertips. Their streamlined software is accessible wherever and whenever you need it. Your clinical records will be secure with less paperwork, which means you can give a much better quality of care. It's the EHR that Gordon uses in his practice. Be sure to check them out today by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and be sure to use the promo code GORDON to get 2 months free.
Well, hello, folks, and welcome to the podcast again. And I'm thrilled, excited, pick your adjective, to have Julie Harris back with me on the podcast. Welcome, Julie.
Gordon, it's so good to be back. Thank you for having me again.
Yes. So Julie and I go back a ways now that I think about it. We met each other. I can't remember what years it was. It was prior to COVID. So that's how we date everything now.
Pre or post.
And Julie and I partnered on a course that we already have been talking about revamping the course some, but money matters in private practice. Yeah. But Julie is the owner of GreenOak Accounting, and it's an accounting firm that specifically their whole niche is helping therapists and counselors in their practices. But Julie, tell folks a little more about yourself for those that might not know you and how you've landed where you've landed.
Yeah, here I am. I am the owner of GreenOak Accounting. We are a team of accountants, tax preparers, all things money related, who work specifically with private practice owners. And we started in this niche originally because we had we started with one therapy client who we still have and loved working with, and he kept sending us therapy, colleagues as clients. And so what we realized one day is there's a lot of similarities between the practices that are doing well. There's also similarities with the ones that are struggling financially. And by sharing this information, it does not take anything away from anyone. We're just sharing best practices. And we saw some practices transform before our eyes. So we became really intentional about working in this niche. But also, I feel like I have the heart of a teacher. And I find that therapists are very highly educated, obviously, and are hungry for knowledge around what exactly is going on in the business and understanding the financial side of their business. So that was just a good fit where they were grateful for the education they were receiving, but also willing to implement some of the changes we suggested.
Yes. And that's as people have heard and know, most of us in this field as therapists and counselors, social workers, we get great clinical training, but the business side of things, the financial side of things is there's little to know or little to none of that is what I'm trying to say in our training. So it's just really an important piece, especially in private practice.
And I approach everything from the lens of every practice deserves to be profitable. And I feel like sometimes we are in a position that we even have to convince our clients that they deserve to be profitable, that they should be making money, which is so interesting because in other industries, like you don't have to convince a surgeon to be profitable, but you come from such a place of wanting to help people that sometimes that's how far we go on the money mindset. But it's so important, right? You're just able. In business, you have to put on your own oxygen mask first. You have to be able to sustain your personal life for all the other things to work and to matter. And so, that's part of what we do. And so I also started the Therapy for Your Money podcast. That's where I talk about all things money and finance, specifically for private practice. We have lots of little tidbits there. And then that's also why I wrote Profit First for Therapists, because I can only, as one person and even with a team, I can only work with so many practices. And I think this message is so important. It needs to be out there. I want to help people implement Profit First, but also in the book, I wrote in a lot of financial building blocks. I want practice owners to understand how the money makes sense in their practice. I included some tax basics, paying off debt, reverse engineering your practice to make it work for your life, compensation for team members. So I included a lot of other things that are kind of adjacent to Profit First, but that are just so needed for practice owners to really understand the financial of their side of their business.
Right. Yeah. For those folks that are listening that might not be familiar with Profit First,
yes,
you want to say some more about that?
Yes. Well, so I'll start with the premise that Profit First turns the traditional accounting equation upside down. So when you look at a profit and loss, which hopefully most business owners have, that's also called the P&L sometimes, or the income statement. That is a report that is going to show at the top income, and then you see all the expenses. So income minus expenses equals profit. That's the accounting equation on your profit and loss. So profit is what's left over. It's what's at the end. So with Profit First, we turn that upside down, where we look at income minus profit equals expenses. When we carve out profit from the very beginning and make sure the practice is profitable, you're naturally going to have less resources left for expenses, but you can make that work. You're kind of reverse engineering your practice to make sure that it is profitable. And that is sustainable. It helps for growth, but it also makes sure that you as the owner are taken care of.
Yes. And one way I think about it, probably if you really think about it, a lot of people operate this way. All of us have just kind of standard bills and things that we have to pay each month and that kind of thing. And so, if we're doing our finances right, we're going to preserve an amount of money to make sure we can pay those things each month. So,
yes.
So like our medical expenses, our electricity, or gas, all of those kinds of things are things that most of us will pay out, in our own home finances is what I'm thinking about. we make sure that we've got those things covered because we don't want our electricity cut off. And so the way I started thinking about it, which was a game changer for me, is just treating your profit exactly like you would one of those other things, with as much importance with that.
Where you're being intentional. Well, and so one of the principles of Profit First is to use small plates. And in this case, the small plate is the smaller plate is a bank account. There's some similarities between how people think about nutrition and money as well. But so I am part of the finish your food generation, right? Where you have to clean your plate. And so for me, if I eat from a big plate, I'm just going to eat more. If I eat from a smaller plate, I will eat less. So the way this principle applies in Profit First is that we are using multiple plates, aka bank accounts. So instead of having one big bank account where all the money's going in, all the expenses are coming out, it can look like there's a lot of money, right? You can look at that amount and say, oh, well, let me, there's 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 or more in that account. Let me just go spend because I have money. But it doesn't account for the fact that maybe your estimated tax bill is due, or this time of year, your tax bill, your rent is due in 2 weeks. You have payroll due in a couple of days. You haven't paid your liability insurance for the year, right? It doesn't take into account all of those things. So what's actually available to you is usually much less. So when we divide your dollar amount into usually 5 or 6 bank accounts, that gives you a really good gauge of what's going on. So typically those bank accounts are going to be an income account. That's where all the money is coming into the practice. In most cases for an insurance practice, your existing checking account is going to become your income account. You're not messing around with your insurance payments. They're still going to the same space. Then we add an OPEX or operating expenses account. That is for your rent payment, your software subscriptions, your liability insurance, right? All the operational expenses. Then we have an owner's pay account. That's the account that's meant to pay you, the owner. So that can take a few different forms depending on the legal entity. But that account, the goal of that account is to pay for your household expenses so that you are okay no matter what. Then for a group practice or a practice that has either an admin employee or whether that's employees or contractors, we add a payroll account. I like to see a separate payroll account because in group practice, payroll is typically your single largest expense. And that's one of the ways that we can really control that and see what's going on. So then on top of that, so that was 4, then we have a tax account where the business is saving for taxes to pay on your behalf. And then last but not least, we have a profit account where we're earmarking money for profit so that at the end of each quarter, you can take half of that amount as a profit distribution. And that's really intended for doing something fun, not just, paying off the bills or paying down the credit card. Like we see your friend Uriah shared that he goes out to dinner with his family every time he does a profit distribution. Like that's part of their ritual. So the whole family gets excited about it. They go out to a nicer dinner. Some people will take that money to go on a trip. We'll buy a hot tub, right? Just do something fun, like a renovation fund. In Q3, I used that trip or that money to take my dad on a father-daughter trip. We had a great time, right? So like whatever you want to do that's meant for like fun things, that is the profit account. So when you have that many accounts, you can look at your bank account. It's telling you something, right? Your bank account saying like, yep, you can afford to spend here, or nope, this is too lean. You can't do that. So instead of trying to change who you are and look at your profit and loss and your statement of cash flow and your balance sheet, all you have to do is look at the bank account, which is what most humans do. And that's going to tell you what you can do. Right.
Yeah. I love that. It's almost like, another way I think about it is just you have different buckets, and every bit of money that comes in, you then allocate it to the particular bucket. You put that amount, a percentage amount too, which I think that was when, I don't think we mentioned here, Julie, the original Profit First book by Mike Michalowicz is kind of where this term came from. And so, it's really more percentage based rather than actual dollar amount based. Yeah. And so that's, yeah.
So within the Profit First system, and certainly this is all very much explained in the book, you go from your current allocations, which is where your practice is today, right? We have on the website, profitfirstfortherapists.com, we have an instant assessment calculator. So you can go get that and figure out where exactly your practice stands today. So you'd fill in, use your profit and loss and fill in, here's how much we're spending on payroll, here's how much on OpEx, and it will calculate for you your current percentages. We call that current allocations. Then what we also provide in the book is target allocations for various sizes of private practice. So we look at a solo practice, a small group practice that's usually, 1 to 5 clinicians, a medium group practice, usually 5 to 10 clinicians or so, and then a large group practice that's 10 plus clinicians, usually $1 to $5 million in revenue. So we kind of cover the gamut of like $0 to $5 million in revenue that covers most practices in the US. And so we give you target allocations based on that size. So how much should you be spending on leadership? How much should you be spending on admin, right? All of those things. So you have something to work towards. And so it isn't uncommon for a practice to come in and realize their current allocations are not within the target, right? And that's okay. There's no judgment zone, but then you can start doing the work to get towards your target allocation so that your profit, your owner's pay, your tax is where it should be. And there's an incredible sense of security and financial freedom that comes with that as well.
Right. Yeah. I love that. And I like, I think the other thing too is recognizing that when you do it that way, I know that one of the things that you probably talk about in the book, and we're going to talk about the book here in a second, but one of the things is the Parkinson's law, where you will, if you limit the size of a room or a bucket or whatever, you generally fill it up. And so you're really kind of limiting the size of things. I mean, I think about if you've ever expanded a room or bought a new house and it's maybe bigger than what you were used to, you'll quickly fill that up. And so that's kind of the same principle.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Parkinson's law says that supply or demand will increase to meet the supply, right? So if you see a big bucket of cash, your demand of it will increase. And in the book, I tell the story of one of my summer jobs. I worked for a tech company. I was a temp admin for the summer, and I worked for this vice president. And so whatever he needed, I did, right? And so that summer, he decided he was getting a bright yellow Porsche Carrera. And so I had one of my jobs that summer was to print out like his pay stubs and his stock sale paperwork and all that stuff. And I could not believe how much money this person was making, right? I was a broke college student at that point. So it probably showed on my face when I walked into his office with all that stuff. I was wondering, like, how in the world does he even need a loan for this car? He's making so much money. Right. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, Julie, the more money you make, the more money you spend. And that's true, right? You just get used to this new standard of living. Every time you make more money, right? I don't live anymore like a broke college student. Like that doesn't work. That wouldn't work for me anymore. And so, but if you naturally restrict how much there is, then you just make it work. And that's why, when we look at investing strategies, if you get a raise and you just take that away right away and just invest it, right? So you don't ever see the raise, then your standard of living isn't increasing. We're basically saying the same thing. If your operating expenses account has a certain amount of money, it will tell you, can you afford to spend or not? And you'll naturally spend less because you'll see like, oh, there's only $6,000 in that account. Like there really isn't room to do something else.
Right. Yeah. It's just, you create a system and a mindset to, it's like if you don't, yeah, I was just thinking about some of the, this last few years I've worked on my weight and all of that kind of thing. And so, part of the thing is you just don't make the foods that you shouldn't have available to yourself. And so do the same thing with your money is that if I want ice cream, well, too bad. I don't have any ice cream that I can have. And so I make that unavailable to myself. So it's really a mindset kind of thing as much as anything, I think.
Yeah. And what I love about Profit First is it doesn't actually ask you to change who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people will look at their bank app. They're not going to look at all the reports in their accounting software. They're just going to look at the bank app. Is there money or is there not? So with Profit First, you don't have to change that. You actually should look at the bank app. But when you see, this dollar amount is in the tax account, and some of our clients call it like Uncle Sam's money or something fun, right? But that money is there, but it's not actually your money. You should not touch it. It's not available to you. And that's so hard to see when everything is in one big pot. But also some of the beauty of Profit First is it's so much easier to identify where a problem is. Like if you don't have enough money to pay your tax bill, okay, there's a problem with that tax allocation. Or if there's not enough money in the payroll account to run payroll, why is that? What's happening? Also, if you're used to the amount in your income account to be at a certain dollar amount every time you make a transfer, if it's not there, you can get to work right away and figure out, why is there not enough money here? Did United not pay this week? Is the biller missing in action? Like, what is happening? You can start troubleshooting so much faster than if the problem is buried with all the expenses, the rent payments, all of it is buried together.
Right. Yeah. So to switch gears here.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the book that's coming out in May.
It is. So in the book, I include specifically all the details on how to run Profit First in a therapy practice. In my accounting firm, we've implemented Profit First hundreds of times. And a lot of the clients that come to us, specifically wanting help with the implementation, always say, I've read the book. I love it. I don't understand how this works specifically for me in therapy. And so that is, what we've included in this book, in addition to, as I mentioned, building blocks, compensation, debt, right? It's not uncommon for our clients to have $100,000 in student loan debt. We want to kick that loan to the curb. There's a lot of things that are really specific to private practice. I also include specifics on processes that are financial systems, what they are, what they should be. But Vernon, you also have a big part in this book. I interviewed you for the book. I'm so grateful for that. And I shared one of your stories that's just really poignant of how your Profit First journey. Do you want to share a little bit of that?
Yeah. So, one of the things that, when I moved into group practice from being a solo practice owner, one of the mistakes that I made, which is really what got me on this whole journey of getting to know Julie and all of this, is that I didn't really know my numbers well. I didn't understand, I'm bringing this much in, I'm paying this much out. And kind of to shorten the story a little bit is that I had contractors that I was paying too much.
Yeah.
I was having to supplement what I was paying them from what I was making from my clients. And so you should never have it that way. And part of it is that I just came up with a random percentage that I thought, oh, this sounds good. This sounds fair. But in reality, it wasn't. And so I went through this transition where I switched from having contractors to having employees, W-2 people. And by doing that, I became much more profitable. And so that's kind of the short version of the story. Were there other things about that? It's been a little while since we did that interview, so I'm trying to think of the other things that stood out for you with that.
No, it's been a little while. And I think the interesting piece here is, for what I hear over and over again, is for someone hiring for the very first time, hiring a full-time employee feels so scary. It's so much pressure, right? Will there be enough work for both of us, or for all of us if it's more than one person? How can I possibly keep them full? will their entire livelihood depend on me? So it feels a lot easier to hire a part-time contractor. That's often the first hire. But the reality, what the data shows us again and again is practices with full-time employees just tend to be more profitable than those with part-time contractors. There's something to be said for having a say in how the business is run, which with contractors, you really can't or shouldn't. That doesn't mean that no one does, but they're having a lot of part-time contractors is also there's a mental load to managing one additional person, right? And so if they're only seeing 5 sessions, 6 sessions a week in your practice, you have that mental load of hiring them and managing them. You also have all the software that goes with it, but you just don't have the revenue that makes sense. And so I thought yours was a very interesting story in part because of that. But then how you rebuilt your practice, right? After realizing that.
Yeah. And it turned out that, when I really did a deep dive into the numbers, actually I was doing those people a much bigger favor by switching them to employees from contractors, even though it might have seemed on the front end like, oh, I was cutting their pay. But what they reaped instead were the benefits I was able to provide them and also the tax savings for them as well.
Yeah. And I think, I just always appreciate you so much sharing that story because and I know it's a vulnerable story, but it's so incredibly common. Like we, at my accounting firm, we see under the hood of hundreds of practices and obviously all that information is confidential, but it's shocking how often an owner is doubling down and working harder to subsidize one of their clinicians. And the reality is that the math has to make sense, right? I believe every practice should be profitable, but also every session, every clinician. So it has to make financial sense for the business, or you're better off not having an employee and you will actually have more money left at the end of the day or the month.
Right.
Because you're not working harder, right? And that's a hard, like when you're in that situation, a lot of practice owners have the gut reaction is, okay, let me just work harder. Let me hire one more person, right? The next thing will save it. Let me expand. But when you're in that situation, hiring one more person just makes the hole bigger. Expanding to a new location makes the hole bigger. Everything you do other than like throwing a stick of dynamite in there and fixing the problem, everything you do will just cost more. And eventually, like that's when practices get in trouble with predatory loans. Like I call them the payday lenders of the space, like where you're getting a loan based on accounts receivable, but the rates are so high, right? And like once you start in that spiral, it's really challenging to get out. And so in an industry where there's such a small barrier to entry, there really is no reason other than, the first maybe 60 or 90 days, like there has to be a profit in the practice. It is not a selfish thing to have a profitable business because you need that. You need to live. And having a profitable practice makes everything easier. Hiring, right? When your team can count on you and know that they're actually going to get paid on time, their check is not going to be late. That makes it easier. It makes it easier to grow your practice, to pay yourself, to get a mortgage on your own house, right? Like all of those things just get so much easier. So I want to change the narrative in the mental health space that there shouldn't be profit. Like you shouldn't be able to profit for helping people. I think you should. You definitely should.
Yes. And if we don't, the bottom line is if you're not making a profit, you will not stay open. You just it will eat itself alive from the inside out. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, there have been a lot of practice owners that have experienced that, where they just didn't know. And it wasn't that they had bad intentions, but it's just that they just didn't know. They didn't know what they didn't know, kind of thing.
Yeah. And right now we're seeing a cycle of that, right? Where I don't personally think that we're in a recession right now, but there still is very much talk of recession, right? We're seeing like there's just things are slowing down in the mental health industry to more pre-COVID levels, right? Where there's still demand. The demand has always been there, will always be there, but it's not this like intense, we have a 200 person waiting list situation anymore. Right. And so, with that, in the last few years, it's been really hard for practice owners to recruit in group practice. And so sometimes we see these offers like someone's offering 70%, 80%, 85%. Can I match that, right? Our clients are coming to us saying, I really want to hire this person. Can I match this other offer they received? And if the math doesn't make sense, you're better off letting them go, because we know that practice cannot survive in those circumstances. You can't offer someone 85% split and make money, especially not as an employee. That means they're costing you 95%. Like the math just doesn't work. Right. And so we have to let that, happen. And we're seeing some of those practices start to fail, and other practices absorbing those clinicians, which unfortunately the clinicians have to take a pay cut, but like that pay was never sustainable in the first place. Like it was just not something that was possible long term. So it's not an easy situation to be in. It is fixable, and you're living proof of that. Yeah. But it's been a weird couple of years on the hiring front, right?
Sure. Yeah. It sure has. Yeah. And that would be a whole other topic we could go into, just about hiring and who to hire and that kind of thing. So, well, Julie, I know we've got to be mindful of our time, and I want to be respectful of yours. Tell folks best way to reach you, the things that you've got, and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, the book is available for sale, Profit First for Therapists. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and most online booksellers. It's also available on Audible and on Kindle. So you've got kind of a slew of options available. You can go to profitfirstfortherapists.com/Gordon if you want to get our free getting started worksheet, where you can get the instant assessment that we talked about. You can get the target allocations. You can get a getting started work checklist. All of that is included in the workbook. So definitely go get that. And then my accounting firm is GreenOak Accounting. If you're interested in working with us, we always offer a free consultation. So that's a great way to get to know us and see if we might be a good fit for you. Always low pressure, non-salesy. That's a good way to connect with us as well.
Awesome. And I will say this, Julie Harris and her team are good people. So be sure and check it out. And you're going to be hearing more from Julie Harris. And check out her podcast, Therapy for Your Money.
We have a Facebook group as well for Profit First. So if you're implementing Profit First and need some accountability, need some questions, we have a free Facebook group. It's Profit First for Therapists. So go join that as well.
Well, Julie, we'll be hearing more from you here soon. Well, big thanks to Julie for joining me again on the podcast. I always just really enjoy being with Julie. She is such a lovely person and really passionate about what we do as therapists. And the other thing too is she really wants to help people understand the financial side of running a private practice. But anyway, check out her book and pre-order her book by going to the profitfortherapists.com website, and you can pre-order her book there. Also, there'll be links here in the show notes and the show summary for you to pre-order. But I'm real excited for this to come out, and you're going to be hearing more about that book. And I hope you'll buy it. As Julie mentioned, she kind of quoted me in the book, so I'm excited about that. So anyway, be sure and check it out at profitfirstfortherapists.com, and also check out GreenOak Accounting, just greenoakaccounting.com, Julie's accounting business. And I know that they do just wonderful things to help people in their practices and all of that sort of thing. So be sure and check it out. And also, before we go, be sure and check out the upcoming course on podcasting. And you can check that out by going to practiceoftherapy.com/podcasting course and learn more about that and how and why you might want to start a podcast. So I enjoy it. And I've been doing it for a while. And so I want to share with you what I've learned, along with my good colleague and friend, James Marlin, who has partnered with me on this to bring you this course. So check it out, practiceoftherapy.com/podcasting course. And also a big thanks to our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes. You can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. And as we mentioned earlier, be sure and use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. They're who I use in my practice, and they are constantly adding to their features and the things that they provide. And they are really the leading, in my mind, the leading and affordable EHR solution for your practice. Again, therapynotes.com or practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Well, take care, folks. Do take time to subscribe to the podcast, or follow the podcast, rather, wherever you might be listening to it, and tell your friends about it, and also leave us a rating. And also a review. That way, just more people can find out about us. And also check out the other great podcasts on private practice building and this whole profession over at Psychcraft Network, psychcraftnetwork.com. Take care, folks, and we'll be with you again next week. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.